It's the final countdown. 20 hours to go for touchdown. India on the verge of creating history. First country to land on the south pole of the moon. A billion prayers, one mission. India on the moon. That's our top focus on India First.
India is all set to script history. So imagine, from a speed of 6,000 kilometers per hour at one time, the aim is to deboost and hover before a gentle touchdown. That's the aim. A soft landing on the south pole of the moon. It's been attempted before, never successfully done. The area has been mapped. It's on the grid of the scientists. Lessons have been learned from Chandrayaan 2. And multiple redundancies have been built into the system to ensure India becomes the first country in the world to achieve this soft landing on the south pole of the moon. But what does this mean and what will it entail? I'm Gaurav Sawant. Over the course of the next half hour, we get you the final countdown. But first, as always, the headlines. Less than 20 hours to go now for Chandrayaan 3's moon touchdown. Isro ready with plan B in case conditions are unfavorable. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to watch the landing live virtually in South Africa. Delhi's alleged rapist Babu and wife's attempt to evade arrest foiled. CCTV images show the bureaucrat at a church days after the FIR was filed against him. Delhi Women's Panel Chief seeks a meeting with the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in South Africa for the BRICS summit at Johannesburg. Big suspense over a bilateral with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Shocking Bihar VVIP culture on display. An ambulance blocked for Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar's convoy despite the patient's family crying. A Bihar police officer also seen holding an umbrella for RJD Supremo Lalu Prasad Yadav. "18 charred bodies found. Wildfire continues to spread across Greece. The bodies were recovered from an area in the northeast of Greece by firefighters struggling hard to control the blaze." With bated breath, a billion-strong nation is waiting for the final touchdown of Chandrayaan 3. The countdown has begun for Vikram lander to softly touch down and land on the south pole of the moon. And once moon dust settles, the Pragyan rover will roll out. And with that, India's national emblem, the Ashok symbol, the Ashok Chin, and of course, the symbol of the Indian Space Research Organization will forever be imprinted on moon. Isro is confident. So far, all systems are working. There are multiple redundancies that have been built in. Every situation has been war-gamed. And of course, also the prayers of a billion-strong nation. India Today's Akshita Nandagopal brings you our top story.
India's moon mission is hours away from a historic climax. Chandrayaan's Vikram lander is approaching the moon rendezvous. Saying hello to Chandrama, snapping breathtaking images from close vicinity, showing moon in all its glory, with details of the unexplored far side, complete with billion-year-old craters. Indian Space Agency asserted that the mission is fully on track. The system is undergoing regular checks to ensure a smooth touchdown.
It is almost similar to what we designed or developed for Chandrayaan 2, except for instead of orbiter now, because orbiter is anyway working fine, and it is still useful and it is giving a lot of important data which will be utilized for Chandrayaan 3 landing also. So we decided that orbiter will be replaced by a propulsion module, which duty is to take it to the orbit of moon surface.
Isro is not taking any chances, especially after crash of the Russian moon mission. Keeping another landing site ready for Sunday touchdown if parameters aren't ideal on Wednesday. Former Isro chief K. Sivan broke down the final maneuvers moments before the planned touchdown.
First of all, Luna mission failure and this one, they are not related. Luna actually that is have its own system, its own the sensor, thrusters, and it may have its own characteristics. But we have our own system, our own thruster, our own sensors, which it has been functioning very nicely and without any problem. And till now we are achieved what we want in a perfect way. And I am sure that this will repeat on 23rd also. So we will get a good landing, and we are not getting disturbed by the Luna 25 failure. They are not related. They are not a similar system. They are different system.
Okay.
So we are confident that we will be able to achieve without any problem.
A billion cheers, prayers and wishes are meanwhile pouring in as India roots for Chandrayaan 3.
एक बहुत बड़ा इतिहास भारत के सभी विशेषज्ञों ने, हमारे वैज्ञानिकों ने रचा है और प्रधानमंत्री जी के नेतृत्व में भारत नई ऊंचाइयां तो छू ही रहा था। भारत का तिरंगा केवल देश के अंदर नहीं लेकिन विश्व पटल पर अब हमारी यही कोशिश है कि वो तिरंगा चांद पे भी गाड़ के रखा जाए।
Special pujas are being held in temples and namaz is being offered in mosques, all for Chandrayaan's success. The lander is expected to touch down on Moon's south polar region at 6:04 p.m. on Wednesday. We wish India a grand success in conquering the moon. With Akshita Nandagopal in Bengaluru and Milan Sharma in Ahmedabad, Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me on India First is Raj Chingappa, Group Editorial Director, Publishing of the India Today Group. Raj, you were there at Isro in 2019. Now, from Chandrayaan 2 mission, there are important lessons learned, multiple redundancies that have been built into the system. And give us a detail of the scenarios that have been wargamed. Is ISRO absolutely confident India is set to create history?
Absolutely, Gaurav. I was speaking to Dr. Somnath, the chairman of ISRO, and he was explaining what were the lessons they learned from the failure of Chandrayaan 2, and what they have done is built on that. I mean, there were 3 or 4 major issues that happened in Chandrayaan 2, which is the propulsion system. It moved too fast when it was supposed to slow down at a particular point. That created its anomaly in terms of the guidance system. That spun the Chandrayaan. I was there while watching the TV. From the mission control, you saw Chandrayaan spin, and then we lost contact. What it did was the control system failed, and it crashed. So what they have done this time is built in each of these critical systems. When it's propulsion, the speed, mind you, Gaurav, and you cover armed forces, is that it's traveling at 6,000 kilometers per hour. That's 5 times the speed of sound. Faster than many of our Sukhois and everything else that's traveling. A civilian jet goes at about 1,000 kilometers per hour max. So you're seeing 6 times the speed. You have to cut it and bring it down to zero so that when it lands, it touches down softly, almost like you're walking on the moon surface. That's what it needs to do with the lander. So one is in terms of the propulsion and the velocity that is need to be cut down. You will need these thrusters that begin to in some sense, retard the speed. There they have done a lot of the, they've made sure that they've got excess fuel, plus they've ensured that if one fails, the other could pick it up and do the balance. The same thing if you take a look at the guidance system. Earlier there was a software error, which meant that the parameters that they had calculated in the algorithm, the moment this went too fast, this turned out. They have now broadened that considerably. And the third aspect of it is in the guidance, the final control and landing, what they have done is that last time they could only land in a patch of, say, like a football field. That was the size that was there. So it was very pinpointed accuracy that they had to do. This time it's much larger. It's like 4 times larger the size, which means that it gives them the leeway. And very cleverly, Gaurav, let me tell you, and that's what gives me the confidence, is that because they had Chandrayaan 2, the orbiter working over there, they've mapped that entire terrain. So they know precisely where they want to land, one. And secondly, because they don't need another orbiter, they've put in more fuel into this. There's almost, the weight of this is almost 200, I think, kgs that they were talking about, which is heavier, which means that they gives them more flexibility. If there's an error, fuel is critical. It's just like if you're traveling from one point to the other, if your car does not have the fuel, it runs out. This was the problem they had when they did with Chandrayaan 2. So this time they made sure they have enough fuel, enough redundancy, and that's why I think tomorrow we're going to celebrate.
And then when Vikram lander comes into land, it'll actually hover like a helicopter for some time if need be. But sir, why is this so important, not just for India, but for entire humankind? From that soft landing, the next 14 days, 14 Earth days and 1 lunar day, why are they so crucial?
Good question. I mean, firstly, let's look at it from the Indian point of view. We are great at building satellites. We have demonstrated that right through for the last 50, 60 years, right? We have reached a competence that's cutting edge. We are great at building launchers. We now have the heaviest launcher, which actually pushed, the initial phase of Chandrayaan into the, beyond the Earth's orbit and on the way to the moon. So we have built competencies in launch vehicles as well as satellites. But when it comes to space exploration, we have done Chandrayaan 1, where we successfully orbited the moon, had an impactor. We have done Mangalyaan, a Mars mission, as well as now we're looking at the sun. Very, very important for scientists to demonstrate. What is the purpose of this mission? There's 3 purposes. One is to ensure that the lander lands on the surface. It didn't do that last time. 2, that the rover moves, comes out from its from the lander and moves. And 3, of course, is the scientific experiments. Each of these 3 have not been done. That's cutting-edge science for Indian space scientists and for India. Now, if you take a look at the importance that is there, is we have seen a remarkable return to the moon. Artemis project, which was started in 2017 by NASA, is now planning to put man back or humans back on the moon by 2025. That's 2 years from now, after a gap of 1972. So you can imagine 4 or 5 decades have gone, and the moon can be a major staging ground for you get experience. Also, let's look at why we there. We feel there's a lot of water, ice, and molecules. What will happen is that we can then colonize the moon in some senses and use it as a gateway to explore space.
Me here on India First, many thanks. The staging camp, as far as Earth is concerned, tactical headquarters for any future operations. Attempts have been made to land on the south pole of the moon even earlier, and not just by 25 mission failed just over the weekend. It's a moon program, a mission moon, but with multiple cameras, lasers, radars in the moon's surface. When it comes into land, it will virtually hover, finding just the right place to land and ensure that there are no and then land, so that the Pragyan rover out the tests for the next 14 days, very crucial for the study of the evolution of our system.
3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
The moon is just 25 kilometers below India's Chandrayaan 3. As a new chapter begins in India's moon tryst, 1 billion people are praying for its successful landing. The Vikram lander is aiming to land on the lunar south pole, which is a difficult feat. So what makes the soft landing near the lunar south pole incredibly difficult? The south pole of the moon's rugged terrain lies in the shade of perpetual darkness and plummeting temperatures. This is where researchers had previously discovered the presence of frozen water. Chandrayaan 3's successful landing will expand knowledge of frozen water on the moon, potentially one of the moon's most valuable resources. Scientists are interested in pockets of ancient water ice because they could provide a record of lunar volcanoes, materials that comets and asteroids delivered to Earth, and the origins of oceans. If water ice exists in sufficient quantities, it could be a source of drinking water for moon exploration and could help cool equipments. It could also be broken down to produce hydrogen for fuel and oxygen to breathe, supporting missions to Mars or lunar mining. Attempted landings on the moon have failed before. Russia's Luna 25 craft had been scheduled to land on the South Pole this week, but spun out of control on approach and crashed on Sunday. The South Pole, far from the equatorial region targeted by previous missions, including the crewed Apollo landings, is full of craters and deep trenches. Chandrayaan 3 is proposed to land in the plateau between two craters, Manzinus and Boguslawski, and a third, Simpelius. Additionally, an alternate landing site has also been proposed. At the mountainous South Pole, the terrain is difficult and dangerous with major craters, minimal sunlight and temperatures below -300°F. If all goes according to plan, Chandrayaan 3 is poised to achieve a historic milestone as the world's first lunar mission to execute a soft landing near the moon's south pole. Bureau Report, India Today.
And as we move forward, let's take a look at India's space journey. From an imported rocket in 1963 to the made in India Chandrayaan 3, incidentally a cost less than that Hollywood film Interstellar. India's space mission has actually come a long way. Of course, anticipation builds around Chandrayaan's moonshot. Today, even the sky is not the limit for India.
वास्तव में अंतरिक्ष में है तो क्या वैसी ही हालत है या कुछ अलग लग रहा है?
India's pride soars high.
ऊपर से भारत कैसा दिखता है आपको?
मैं बगैर किसी झिझक के कह सकता हूँ कि सारे जहां से अच्छा.
Astronaut Rakesh Sharma becomes the first Indian to explore the celestial realm in a joint space mission with what was then Soviet Union. But the country achieved its first astronomical feat much before in 1963. Nike Apache, a two-stage sounding rocket imported from the United States, blasted off from a fishing village near Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala. Over the last 6 decades, India's space program has evolved enormously. From launch vehicles for satellites, INSATs for telecom, broadcasting, meteorology, remote sensing for satellite imagery, to research and development in space. From Aryabhat, a satellite designed and fabricated indigenously and launched from a Soviet rocket in 1975, to now on course to reach the moon and become the first country to explore its south pole.
Here we have a majestic liftoff of LVM-3 M4 rocket carrying India's prestigious Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft.
Because that's a place where we can get sufficiently enough solar heat, light for power generation. If you go further, there is a possibility that you will not get the full daytime utility.
15 years ago, India's first moon mission performed a detailed search of evidence of water and chemical composition of certain lunar rocks. The sky is the limit for the country's space ambitions. India's first space-based mission to study the sun. Aditya L1 nearing its launch date by the end of August or early September.
Currently, payloads are getting integrated with the satellite, and it will go through a series of testing, including thermovag, vibration, so many things. And after that, we will have the launch. It goes in a PSLV, so that will send a commercial launch. So after that, we are already starting another building a next PSLV, and we are targeting by August end that Aditya can go.
Isro working on the Chandrayaan mission, India's first manned space flight program. Blazing its way through the Earth's final frontier, India establishes itself as a space power and a master of space engineering. Bureau Report, India Today.
And not just India, not just a billion-strong people, it's actually the world that's watching India. My colleague Akshita Nandagopal spoke exclusively to a former NASA astronaut and the commander of the International Space Station, Chris Hadfield, on India's Chandrayaan-3 mission and what the world is looking at. Let's listen in to some excerpts.
And it's my absolute pleasure to be joined here on India Today by Chris Hadfield, former commander of the International Space Station and author of the Apollo murders. Just to give you a brief sense of all that Chris has achieved, he's flown in 3 missions, built 2 space stations, performed 2 spacewalks, and was the first Canadian to have walked in space. So you'd understand why I'm particularly excited about his new book, The Defector, that is in fact releasing on October 10th. That's coming out. Chris, good morning. Congratulations on your new book, and thank you very much for joining us here on India Today. I've been seeing, from your social media interactions that you've been tracking the Chandrayaan-3 moon mission very, very closely. Just so for our viewers to understand from an expert perspective, from your perspective, how hard really is a soft landing on the moon?
Well, thank you and good evening. I heard someone say 1 billion cheers for Vikram, and I had my voice as one of those billion cheers. It's immensely exciting, but as you say, it's extremely hard. It's 400,000 kilometers away, and we're landing way down to the south, 70 degrees south. It's as if you were landing on the edge of Antarctica, and you're trying to do it where the final last few meters or few feet of touchdown, you're just counting on the automatic systems. And so there can always be, a boulder in the way or an uneven spot on the ground, even though they've chosen a plateau. And I know that the Russians had no success earlier this week. Remember, they've launched 27 missions to the moon, and they only landed 7 times, and the last one was a failure. So it's still exquisitely difficult. But with the tremendous experience gained in Chandrayaan-1, which helped discover water on the moon, in Chandrayaan-2, which has been mapping the moon ever since, and now with sort of the granddaughter of all of those, of Chandrayaan-3, I'm really optimistic and excited about the landing that's going to be happening just slightly under 24 hours from now.
You know, I loved how you referred to Chandrayaan 3 as the granddaughter of these missions. It's so aptly put. I'm going to borrow that phrase also in the next 24 hours. You referred to Lunar 25, and the reason I talk about it right now, Chris, is look, Russia has attempted this, as you said, 27 times. They've got it right 7 times. Now, in the last 50 years or so, we've seen several such soft landings occur. It's 2023, and yet we haven't really been able to master it. Why is that? What makes it so unpredictable or so hard so many years on?
Well, part of it is the nature of the moon itself. If you were going around the moon, the amount of gravity that you feel in different parts of the orbit changes. The moon is a lot more lumpy than the Earth is. It's got big, dense sections. And so that makes orbital prediction more difficult. It's hard to know exactly where you are. There's no GPS. So where exactly around the moon are you? How do you even figure that out? And even though we've taken lots of images from the orbiting vehicles of the plateau that Chandrayaan 3 and Vikram are going to land on, you still don't know the fine details. You know, imagine if you were trying to land a helicopter somewhere in India and you looked and looked and looked, but then just when you got close to the surface, you had to sort of close your eyes and then just descend the last 50 meters with your eyes closed. It's sort of that level of difficulty. And that's why the engineers at Isro have been working so hard since Chandrayaan 2 to improve all of the systems, to make the landing gear wider and more robust, to try and give extra layers of backup. And it is possible to land on the moon. 3 other nations have done it. And I think India is really poised right now to be the 4th nation in history to land on the moon. The scientific impact of that and the inspirational impact of that for young Indians right across the country. But it all comes down to that last descent and touchdown coming up within a day now.
Well, 3 nations have done it, but India will be the first to do it on the South Pole of the moon. And we'll be tracking that story very, very closely. That is all I have for you on India First this evening. Many thanks for watching.